welcome. As you might have noticed, I muted all of you to avoid any background noise. But whenever you want to contribute to the conversation, feel free to unmute yourself by hitting the button on the bottom left of your screen where the little microphone shows up. Also, you have the possibility of looking at this call and watching it in two different views, speaker view and gallery view. You can switch between those two in the top right. And lastly, and some of you already were super active in the chat, please put in where you're calling in from, any questions you might have, and we try to get to as many as possible. And lastly, before Susie will kick it off officially, I wanted to remind you that we are recording the call and we'll send out the recording as well as the chat in the follow-up, so you have all the information at your fingertips. Back to you, Susie, to officially start the call, and I will share the opening slides.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. I appreciate it. And so welcome, everyone. This is the Global Wellness Summit, March 30th, Wellness Sector Spotlight. And this week's sector spotlight, the spotlight is on mental wellness, understanding the impact of the $121 billion mental wellness economy on your business. So I wanted to say thank you, first of all, to our sponsor, the Brain Health Institute. And we'll be hearing from Stephanie Peabody later during the Zoom call. And just to note that as long as we have generous sponsors, and happily we do, for many of our Zoom calls, we'll be able to offer them without cost to all of you who sign up. And I'm grateful for that. So thank you to Stephanie and welcome. And my name is Susie Ellis, and I'm the chair and CEO of the GWS, Global Wellness Summit, and the nonprofit Global Wellness Institute, and I'm going to be your host today. I also want to mention that on our call are a few others from our GWS team. You've already met Beatrice. You can wave, Beatrice, so people know who you are. And also joining us is Michelle Gamble, if you'll wave and let everyone know who you are. She's the VP of Business Development. And Nancy Davis, who's the Chief Creative Officer, and creative is the word for Nancy, and Executive Director of both the GWS and the nonprofit Global Wellness Institute. And I'd like you to just say a few words, Nancy.
Susie, thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I'm only going to say that I think these virtual gatherings have been very good for our collective mental wellness, and I very much look forward to hearing some positive news on this front. So thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Nancy. And Nancy is going to help me watch the chat for questions. So because it's a little hard for me to watch the chat, and we have some panel and discussions planned, so she'll watch the chat. So feel free to ask questions in the chat, and Nancy will alert me to the ones that she thinks we should bring up. So I have divided our time today into 3 segments. To begin with, I'm going to share a few slides with you that I hope will help set the stage for this very important discussion. And those slides are from the Global Wellness Institute's mental health, defining mental wellness actually, report. And this report is available to everybody for free on the Global Wellness Institute website. And it's an important report, and it's an important way, I think, to start the topic, because mental wellness has never really been discussed. This is a new topic. You've seen it in the news a little bit, the term, but it's really relatively new. The second thing we're going to do is I have a prominent panel of people who are either members or contributors to the GWI initiative on mental wellness, which has been very active and really part of the reason that we brought mental wellness to the forefront. And then third, I'm going to open the discussion about some of the positive happenings in the mental wellness arena amongst us, and so that we can help understand the impact and the opportunities. So to start with, Beatrice, if you'll show the first slide. This will be a familiar slide, I think, for a lot of you. So you're probably familiar with the bubble chart, as we call it. And this is from the Global Wellness Economy Report. And you can see that the full economy of wellness globally is 4.5 trillion. And note that this is the most up-to-date version of the report and of the bubble chart. And you can see that what we have in here is the mental wellness bubble. Maybe you've seen a bubble chart before, but the mental wellness bubble was only added last November. And mental wellness is, as you can see here, $121 billion economy. So I think, Beatrice, you're going to try and mute everyone. We have somebody that's not muted.
Yeah, I unfortunately can't find the person that is muted because unmuted because we're so many. So whoever unmuted, please mute on the bottom left.
Okay. So for those of you who are new, and I know there's some people here for the first time, what this chart shows is the size in relation to the other sizes of the economy of the different bubbles. For example, wellness, tourism, physical activity, nutrition, and weight loss. And you can see the size relative. So mental wellness right now, and this was the first time this report was done, is at 121 billion. I think we all recognize that number is likely to go up over time, but this is a good number to start with. So this is a yearly revenue economic figure. So next slide. So as I mentioned, this is the mental wellness economy report. It's called Defining the Mental Wellness Economy. It's very groundbreaking. Nancy's going to put the link to this in the chat, and you can all find it on the Global Wellness Institute website, where we give away the report for free. We like to get as much information out there as possible. The researchers worked on this report for an entire year, and in preparation for this call, I reread it. It's really well thought through, and there's a lot of very valuable information in there. So I just encourage you to download the report and read it. Next slide. What is mental wellness? This is the first time it's actually been defined, and I think it's been a big help to have that definition to work with. And mental wellness is an internal resource that helps us think, feel, connect, and function. It's an active process that helps us to build resilience, growth, and flourish. And the researchers divided this into thinking and feeling and functioning and connecting. So that's kind of just a top line way of looking at it. And the next slide, we're going to drill down a little bit more. So I want you to look at this slide because it's really very important. You can see here how they divide it, and look at the middle column. It says activity and creativity, growth and nourishment, rest and rejuvenation, connection and meaning. Now, all of those are pathways to mental wellness. And if you can see what you're doing, it's probably in one of those four sections. You might be in activity, you might be in creativity, growth, nourishment, connection, and meaning. And so a lot of what we do, in fact, maybe even most of what we do in our arena, has to do with mental wellness and can contribute to mental wellness. But for the report, and I think this is really very valuable, and I didn't necessarily catch this when I first read through it. You can see here the red outlined area is growth and nourishment, rest and relaxation. So Catherine and Ophelia, who did the report, looked at these segments and recognized that activity and creativity, which is at the top, is something we're already measuring in other bubbles. So you can see gyms, parks, some of the arts and such. Those are in our, for example, physical activity bubble. So it isn't that those things don't contribute to mental wellness, but for this study, they were not added to the economic figure because that would be double counting. Also, if you go down to connection and meaning, and I think this is such an important part that I think intuitively we're all recognizing, family and friends, nature, religion, spirituality, gratitude, all of those things, volunteering, are really, really important for mental wellness. They are also not counted in this report. And here's the reason why that they stated very clearly, because a lot of them don't have revenue to do with it. I mean, you put people in nature, you're not necessarily going to connect revenue with that. Family and friends, religion and spirituality. So those are really, really important. And it's important that we value them. However, they're not counted for revenue in this report. I think that's very, very valuable. Next slide. So the emerging industry of mental wellness, the mental wellness industry encompasses businesses whose primary aim is to help with mental wellness pathways of growth. And, you know, I can't read that because my computer, nourishment and rest and rejuvenation. Okay, these 4 segments, these are subsectors: self-improvement, meditation and mindfulness, brain boosting, nutraceuticals and botanicals, senses, spaces, and sleep. Those are the 4 subsectors. And by the way, I had an email from someone right before this call who asked about CBD and psilocybin. And those are actually covered in brain boosting nutraceuticals and botanicals, because that is recognized now, starting to be recognized as an area of exploration. So, so you'll be interested to see that it is included, not that there's a lot of revenue yet associated with that, because Catherine and Ophelia only counted what was legal around the world, which is not necessarily everything at this point. So next slide. These are the numbers that they found to be associated with these new categories. So self-improvement at about 33 billion, the brain boosting nutraceutical 34 billion. The largest one is senses, space, and sleep at almost 50 billion. And then the one that we might be the most familiar with, meditation and mindfulness, at 2.9 billion, almost 3 billion. So you can see that the meditation and mindfulness, which is something that we're more familiar with than maybe some of these others, is the smallest of the subsectors. So thank you for that. I think that's the last slide, right, Beatrice? Is there another one? I think that's it. Okay, very good. Thank you. So that's an introduction. And now I want to get right to asking our panel. We have about 6 or 7 panelists. And we're going to start the first part of this call with we want to know what's going on around the world and what the most challenging mental health concern is in your area of or orbit. So I want to start with, let me start with Margaret. You're in Brazil and you're a clinical psychologist. And can you just tell us, and here is the question I ask of each of the panelists to prepare, and I'm only giving them a minute to answer this question. The question is, what is happening in your part of the world with the pandemic? And what do you believe are the most important mental health concerns in your area or orbit? So, Margaret?
Yes, hello everyone, greetings. Yes, we are facing a very difficult time in Brazil. The new Manaus variant, P1, has spread all over. So number of cases and number of deaths increased. The national and public and private health system, intensive care unit beds are 100% full. So that's a huge, huge challenge. People are also getting vaccinated. That's the wonderful news we have. We have 2 plants producing and delivering 11 million doses every week. And also a very good news that we found out that Brazil has a very young population. So now people between 60 and 67 are being vaccinated in the next 2 weeks. So that's wonderful news, because in 2 weeks, people under 60 will be vaccinated. And so
Margaret,
we are producing.
Excuse me, Margaret, what are you finding? And thank you for that, because we know and we're reading about Brazil really, really having a challenge. What are you finding in your arena is the mental wellness or mental health challenges that you're seeing the most?
For example, last week we had in La Pina, among our guests, we are 80% full for the last 9 months. 20% of our guests were medical doctors. They come exhausted and they want to sleep, they want to breathe, they want to connect, but just to hear people, they want to go into nature. So we feel that taking care of the people who are in the front is a great challenge. And also entrepreneurs that are losing their business, people who are losing their jobs. So this arena, I mean, we can offer so much. We say that we are a pocket of hope, an oasis. And we are very thankful because our whole team, clinical team, doctors, nurses, masotherapists, statisticians, they were all vaccinated because of us being a clinic. So we feel in the position of taking care of people who come and they are exhausted.
And Margaret, thank you for that. And just a quick question. Did you say you were 80% full or 8%?
80. 80. Yes.
Okay. I thought that from previous calls, I knew you were doing, having pretty good occupancy, and I thought you had said 8, so it's 80. Thank you for that. I want to go to Sergio, Dr. Sergio Pecorelli from Brazil. We're going to Italy. Dr. Pecorelli, what is happening in Italy, and what do you see as the most important mental wellness concerns, or mental health concerns, actually? I'm going to say it that way.
Well,
Dr.
thank
Pecorelli?
you. Thank you, Susie. Well, we are all in the lockdown in Italy. This is the main point. And in all of Europe, more than 25 million people have been affected. And there are also something like almost 600,000 people that died. At least 70% of the Europeans are mentally affected by the pandemics, and 20% of them are severely affected. The consequences you can imagine in all ages ranges, like children, adolescents, adults, elderly people, and so on. The most important thing is an increased isolation and loneliness in the population, which are strongly associated, of course, as you may expect, with anxiety, depression, self-harm, suicide, and so on. The point here is that the long-term impacts will be significant. And finally, one important thing which relates mainly to what I do is the low fertility rate in all European countries, which is high, but indeed all over the world, as you know. And a huge part of this cause is stress levels in both men and women. So there is finally a lower ability to make decisions in all levels, from top managers to simple workers. And so this is real pandemics.
Thank you, Sergio. We're going to hear again from you and from all the panelists with the next round of questions. But it's really fascinating to hear, first of all, that Italy is, back on lockdown, and that all of Europe, there's so much stress, and that the fertility part, especially for men, is an interesting thing. And I know Europe watches fertility maybe a little bit more than other countries. And the decision-making issue, because we're all affected by that. So thank you, Sergio. I want to go to the US. Melise Galula, are you on? And can you give us some input and insight?
Yes. Hi, Susie. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I think something that's been top of mind for me, and we've all been reading in the papers here lately, are the not great news at all. I wanted to come with some prevention and hope, but I think what we have to address is the racial reckoning that continues in the United States, and just how much that's been connected to the pandemic, and how much is just circulating. In the mental health space, I am really aware of, and so is our new president, unfortunately, on the impacts of the pandemic disproportionately to people of color in general. So there have been a lot of initiatives sparked as a result. And I think this is something we're going to continue to see. It's begun at the grassroots level. Biden has a task force that is working on this as well. But there have been several things originating in the wellness space that have come up in support. Some good examples that I've pulled for everyone are Naya Wellness. They function out of New York City. They have raised funds for computers to enable virtual access to things like yoga and meditation. And they're also raising funds now for young folks who identify as BIPOC to provide therapy and help cover therapy costs. There's also Black Girl Breathing. It's a virtual breathwork circles. Breath was one of the trends of the Institute this year. And that is, something that we have also written a lot about on the initiative, the Mental Wellness Initiative, as something that's available to all of us. So I think that's a really great tool that's going to continue to blossom. There's also the Asian Mental Health Project that focuses on support and community for young people. It's not a replacement for therapy. Again, it's just digital communities and support and inspiration. So I think given what's been happening in the news here and for the lives of people of color in this country, this is going to be forever tied to this past year and linked to how we think about mental health and wellness and how we solve for it.
Thank you, Melise. And, I know we have the trial going on right now for the George Floyd situation. And so I think it's going to be in the news. And so thank you for that perspective from the US. This is a big issue. Can you just talk about BIPOC? You mentioned it. I'm not sure everybody knows what that means.
Sure. I'm sorry. Yes, it's an acronym that's become kind of popular here in the States. Yeah. Black, Indigenous, people of color. So it's that identification.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you. From the US, I want to go to Germany, and that would be Alina. And so Alina Hernandez, she's the co-founder of the First 1,000 Days of Wellness, vice chair of the GWI Mental Wellness Institute. Alina, what's going on in Germany, and what's the big mental health concern there?
Well, it's I'm in the Rhineland, so it's just 20 minutes outside of Dusseldorf. And basically in Germany, the virus has been very contained. There is really now finally a fairly good rollout of the vaccine. And I would have to say that pretty much is under control. There's no issues around Biden's to mask wearing and things like that. And so from that perspective, I think that they're doing probably better than other European countries. And the lockdown here is not as severe in Italy. You can freely circulate in the entire country. You can even go to the Netherlands, provided that you have, positive COVID, negative COVID testing and so forth. But for me, the most significant thing that I have seen actually firsthand is the dramatic increase in chronic stress in the population. And how do I know this? Because on the tail ends of what Dr. Pecorelli has just said, I'm very fortunate to be coordinating a major primary piece of research that Dr. Pecorelli designed. And this research, one of the things that we're doing is we're testing anti-inflammatory treatment in an open population and in a closed population. And what we have seen is that there's a dramatic increase of stress levels. So at normal times, non-pandemic times, it's about 50% of the general population that's chronically and acutely stressed. We are now seeing absolutely levels of upwards of 95% of the general sampling of this population that I have personally been testing at very high levels of stress. And that really plays havoc with all of frontal lobe and limbic systems function. And
the decision making. Alina, was your sample mostly Germany or what was your sample mostly?
Well, it was a German population of men and women ages 18 to 36 and then 36 to 65, equally weighted more or less. And that was the first part was a closed, and now we're going into an open population, which will be an increase of the numbers as well as, a greater sampling, larger numbers too.
Thank you, Alina. Really appreciate it. Is Lawrence Choi, Dr. Lawrence Choi on? Because if he is,
Susie.
Good, good.
Yes, I'm
There you
here.
are. I
Hi.
know it's very early on the West Coast. Dr. Lawrence Choi is a psychiatrist in Silicon Valley, and also part of the Mental Wellness Initiative. Dr. Choi, what are you seeing, and what's happening in Silicon Valley, and what are you seeing as the major mental health issues?
Hey, good morning, Susie, and good morning, Global Wellness friends from Silicon Valley. So what we're seeing, I guess, I am a psychiatrist and I treat adult ADHD and cognitive performance. So many of the patient population I treat are working at the tech companies. So they tend to be more in the haves versus the have-nots. So they're doing pretty well. And the main thing that they're challenged with is navigating the pandemic fatigue. So pandemic fatigue is chronic stress, as Alina noted. And chronic stress is, I guess, on a, biological perspective, it is cortisol. So people are developing, if they're not navigating their stress well, they develop cortisol resistance, just as someone who's diabetic, if there's constant glucose in their bloodstream, they develop insulin resistance. So it's very important how we navigate the chronic stress. So speaking about mental wellness is how we take care of our mind, body, and brain. So I help these patients learn to meditate, and the way I do that is to just provide them recommendations to different apps. So there's Headspace, there's Muse, there's Calm. So there's a bunch of different apps that people can use to meditate. And for the body, it's important how we move our body, that we're stressing our body rather than letting stress our body. So so it's important to sweat. And now there's different platforms like Peloton that people can use. There's a community base that really motivates and challenges people to work out. And taking care of our brain, like getting enough sleep, right? Nutrition. So these are things that there's many types of services as well that can really create a habit for people so that they don't have to really motivate themselves, that there's something else motivating them.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to you, but it is interesting to observe that someone in Silicon Valley has already jumped right into a lot of tech solutions because I imagine that is, and interesting that you said that the issue there is, people in the tech world are doing fairly well. They are not the ones that are suffering a lot financially, but the pandemic fatigue and so on is interesting. So we're gonna come back to that tech issue again. So thank you. And now over to Australia. If Jerry Boddicker, Professor Jerry Boddicker is on, he is really heads up our mental wellness initiative, and Oxford, Columbia, clinical psychologist. And I understand he's on a trek, and so he was going to try and be on. And so, Nancy, is he on? And where are you, Jerry? Jerry Boddicker? Maybe later? Well, I knew that he was going to be on a trek, and he was going to try and find a good place. But as we all know, and for his mental health, that's probably a good place to be. I know I've spoken with Jerry, and he has been displaced from Malaysia, which is where he has his home. He went to visit some of his family in Australia and got stuck there. And he's been stuck there for a year, although, as he said, it's maybe not a bad thing because Australia has done pretty well with the pandemic. So when he comes on, we will hear from him. I want to go to Stephanie very quickly. And Stephanie, you are a sponsor today, and you are part of the Brain Health Initiative. And I'd like you to explain to people what that is, because it's fairly new. I know you're in Florida. And if you can just introduce it quickly, that would be great. Stephanie?
Yes, good morning, everyone. So the Brain Health Initiative is an initiative that is supported in part through Massachusetts General Hospital, a Harvard Medical School teaching hospital. And we selected the Suncoast region, Sarasota, Florida, as our headquarters, really explicitly focusing on building brain healthy communities and cultures that proudly protect and promote brain health, that focus on solutions that optimize brain performance, and that prevent and protect brain health across the ages. We have a starting brain health innovation accelerator, eager to hear from any of you who have novel solutions that you would like to bring to our Brain Health Living Laboratory across 2 counties that work, again, where people live, work, learn, and play, bringing novel solutions to increase brain health outcomes at the individual, family, and community level. So
and Stephanie, I want to let people know that you and I have spoken, and what I'm impressed with, first of all, is that you are about a brain health community. So we've talked about, you know, wellness, real estate, and communities that focus on physical activity and nature and that sort of thing. But you are tell us a little bit about that community, and then give us in the chat the connection, the URL, so people can take a look at it.
Excellent. So we purposely selected the Gulf Coast region, headquartered in Lakewood Ranch, Florida, again, surrounded by Sarasota and Bradenton, Florida, and the richness from Tampa, St. Petersburg, south and north. So although we're headquartered here, we really are about the entire region. We are running a brain health longitudinal study inspired by the Framingham Heart Study, but it's really about the brain. And this is following populations from before birth until the end of life. We have just launched the pilot to that brain health study. We also have the Innovation Accelerator, as I'm sharing with you, and we have an extensive community engagement program, which really is about being brain healthy, being brain powerful, initiating school districts, hospitals, the general community where people live. It is really the process of developing a culture where brain health becomes an apple a day type of mentality. And so,
Thank you, Stephanie. I think I'd like to encourage, as you reached out, for people to get in touch with you. Absolutely. Because that's really why you stepped up to, you know, be a sponsor today. And I find it fascinating that what you're doing, it's new. We're all kind of new in the mental wellness space. So, you know, reach out to Stephanie and see what she's doing there and contribute to it, because it's also new. And, you know, having our, you know, communities be brain healthy to begin with is certainly a good idea. So thank you, Stephanie. Absolutely. I want to go now to Jerry Boddicker.
Jerry Boddicer's joined. Yes.
Susie, I just want to say, I'm Dr. Peabody's assistant, and I put my information. My name is Kim Mealy, everyone, and I put my information in the chat. And if anybody can email me directly in our website, so that will be helpful for Dr. Peabody. I can help answer any questions and organize her emails.
Excellent idea, because there's a lot of people on the call, and I think they're going to get in touch with you. Thank you for giving us that. And I understand Jerry Boddicker is on the call. I don't know if he's on visibly or not, but Jerry, over to you. I've already introduced you. What's going on in Australia when it comes to the pandemic, and also what are the biggest mental health issues? Jerry, is he on? Maybe you have to unmute.
Beatrice confirmed he had joined the call, so I'm passing that along. Still on there, right, Beatrice?
Yes, he's on, but I don't see a microphone icon next to it, so I'm not sure if he has audio connection.
Okay. We will wait. We will wait. So, okay. I'm going to go to our next question, and any of the panel can jump in, please. And then I'm going to open it up so others can jump in too. And some of them have already sent me some information that I think that would be great for them to share. Here is the question. What have you seen that has recently been added to a program that is successfully addressing mental wellness issues that have resulted from the pandemic? So I'm wanting to just set this up. A lot of what we do, you know, the exercise, the healthy eating, the mind, you know, the meditation, mindfulness, and so on, that is already really valuable when it comes to mental wellness. But what have you seen that is maybe new, that has now been added because of the pandemic, that is contributing? So I'm going to open it up to any of the panelists.
Yes, I can start with. Yes.
Thank you, Margaret. Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. Apart from good sleep, good nutrition, meditation, movement, what we found out is that people want connectivity. So we try now to have small groups where they can interact. And that's a great surprise for us. For example, instead of a doctor giving a lecture and the audience being out there, now they go out in nature, sit under a tree in a circle, and they talk about the issues. So it requires more from the doctor because he has to be closer to the guests, but it's been such a good movement because people engage in whatever groups we offer. We offer groups to go into nature, we offer music and lecture, but people want to connect. And I just want to give you an example. A young novelist from Canada, she came 3 months ago to stay a fortnight with us. She keeps extending and she doesn't want to go back. And she says that this community life, because there are 160 people working and some live out in the farm, but this to feel protected, but also to have people to connect with. So I think this connectivity is very important for all people who are in the business, to offer small spaces, groups, people, not therapy, not group therapy, but just groups where people can experience things together and have a chance to talk about it, to be seen, to be heard. So that gives that the cortisol level that Lawrence spoke about, it goes down. People out in nature, people connecting, smiling or crying, someone looking at the person. So cortisol level goes down. So that's a very small tip, but we see it working. So I wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. And it might be the most important thing we're going to hear today, because it's something we can all do to encourage that. But I want to ask you a question. When you send people out in nature for their small group, do you give them a question to discuss, or how do you kind of get them started?
Yes, for example, before the doctor says something, he asks, how are you doing? People are in different programs. What's your success? What's your challenge? Some are trying to quit smoking, others are trying to lose weight, others are under stress. So to ask people how they are, where they are now. And so we just have small, or what makes you step out of bed today? Or what motivates you? So small questions to start the conversation, and people know how to talk. They want to talk.
That's a good point. Margaret, how large are the groups and how long do you facilitate these for?
Yes, we are having half of the population in groups. So if we have 40 guests, we have groups of up to 20. If we have 30, we have 15. But then we have also smaller groups because not everyone goes to that place. And so I would say 10 to 15 is a good number.
And how long is the discussion usually with that group?
Not more than an hour.
Okay.
We say that everything that happens within an hour is a good thing. If we take it too long, if we extend that time, then people talk nonsense sometimes.
Yeah. We can relate to that. Thank you. Very helpful. Lawrence, can you talk to the importance of this group discussion? And are you doing any of that with those Silicon Valley entrepreneurs and such? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess many people in Silicon Valley might be on the spectrum, so then they might be averse to connection sometimes. But I think a lot of these Zoom or videos has allowed people to connect just like we're doing right now. And people here tend to be very data driven. So a lot of the devices, apps, they do provide data. Like, for example, oh, here's my son. All right.
Oh, hello there.
All right. Oh, daddy's on the call. I'll talk to you. I'll play with you later. Okay, thank you. All right. Did a little cameo.
What's your son's name, Lawrence?
Zachary.
Zachary. Well,
yeah,
hello to Zachary. And he's up early too. So
yes. And so data for sleep, there's all these devices that provide like very accurate data about how much sleep you're getting, deep sleep, REM sleep, so people can really optimize their sleep just based on the data that they're getting. So that is the trend here. Data-driven products.
One thing you mentioned, Lawrence, which I have read about, is that a lot of people in technology, they are not so group oriented. They're a little bit more, they're not extroverts, they're introverts. And even they don't like Zoom calls, or they certainly don't want to be visible on Zoom calls.
Yes.
So I'm very interested in that because does it still help them to connect with other people? Is it something that
of course,
encouraged?
it's just that their social circle might be smaller, and in fact, they tend to be thriving because they're introverts. So during the pandemic, they don't have to go out for all these social obligations, and they're doing much better than before. All right.
Very interesting. Thank you, Lawrence. And maybe in those cases, smaller groups might be better. I can imagine that a group of 10 would be too many.
Yes.
Maybe a group of 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Thank you. Melise, can you jump in on the discussion here? Because I know you have some good.
Yeah, there's definitely a thread here, Susie. There's so much happening around the small group model and concept. I think that is deliberately a result of the isolation that people have experienced, but also lack of access to therapy and therapeutic services, and lack of awareness about what people can do home alone in support. But, it's not the case that that prevention takes care of that sense of loneliness. And there is, a loneliness pandemic as well. So the small group model, I think, is something that we can expect to see really professionalized and even branded. There are tech platforms that are teletherapy based. SESH is one of them. That's SESH. That has raised money to create theme-based groups. So that theme could be age, or it could be relationships, or something else that's more specific. So, and some of them are kind of cool and millennial focused too. So that's kind of a spin-off from the other telehealth models that are text-based or teletherapy one-to-one based. So I think we'll see platforms where possible building a more community focus. It actually helps the therapy community. I think, like Margaret was saying, therapists have been on the front line of this for a year too. And, you can't reach everyone, and their burnout levels are high as well. So I think when you can, speak to a group of 8, 10, 12, they chime in as peer support as well. So those are some things that I think are going to be popping a lot more as this year goes on.
Melise, the one that you mentioned with the specific focus, like aging or whatever it is, how large are they? And is anyone facilitating them, or do they sort of get together on their own?
No, these are facilitated by licensed therapists. And I think one of the issues of the model is that this is a regulated issue state to state in this country. So I don't know that it's available everywhere yet, right? So, if Lawrence is licensed, in California, he might not be licensed to administer in New York, for example. It's the same case for anyone who is on these telehealth platforms, and I think that's something that will have to evolve, right? The legalities of the piece. But all these telehealth companies, because they are being called slickly marketed. There's a great piece in New York Magazine about the marketing of these telehealth companies, have to really watch their licensing and accreditation. And I think that's for consumers' protection.
Thank you, Melise. And I think that brings up a good point for all of us to recognize that, this is a little bit of a slippery slope. We can get into snake oil very easily with these kinds of things. So we, as a community, need to be very We need to trumpet evidence-based. We need to encourage research and be very transparent about what has research and what doesn't. You know, yoga for a long time, you know, there hadn't been a lot of studies, but a lot of people did it. I think that in our community, we can say that, you know, first of all, we can now point to research for yoga, for meditation, for so many of the things that we do. But we also want to encourage more of that. So, Alina, do you want to jump in on this?
I just wanted to mention that Jerry
Yes.
Boddicker.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nancy.
I just wanted to say that Jerry Boddicker has assured me he is connected.
Yes, now and that's interesting. This is perfect segue. So Jerry and I have been chatting right now, and I'd like to bring his voice into the room because he has not, you know, he's having technical difficulties, but Jerry and I have had endless conversations that I think tie up all of these ends that we've all heard on the Zoom call today. And that is when we all collectively wrote the white paper, I think most of us contributed, and the ones that have followed have contributed even more also in another way. We wanted to make sure that everybody understood that there are different pathways to the same mountain of mental wellness. And it is not a one size fits all, but most importantly, to underscore what Melise just said, and to this really important point, we need evidence. We cannot make claims to help people and benefit people if it is not backed up by robust science and if it is not verified. So I think that one of the biggest issues that I've seen to the second question is, you know, I'd like to look at this as a kaleidoscope of technology, data, which I believe is a new Bitcoin of the mental wellness industry. It is now the Bitcoin of medical. And I think it'll also be a Bitcoin in this industry. And finally, to be able to link let's say the heritage that we have of the ancient wisdom and spiritual traditions. And we have to, I think, really remember that a lot of this gets bolted together by everyone's spiritual practice. This is not a one size, and it's not two polarities. It is actually two sides of the same coin. So
thank you, Alina. I'm going to go to Jerry, and I would like to just underscore what you said. I hope everyone here is aware of wellnessevidence.com, or you can find it on our Global Wellness Institute website. And Beatrice, if you'll put that link in the chat, because we can already help you find what evidence there is, or what modalities don't have a lot of evidence yet. Jerry, I hope you're there. This is a good time for you to wrap things up. Go ahead, Jerry.
Can you see me and hear me?
Yes, welcome.
All right, finally. My apologies, I'm in a remote part of Northwestern Australia, and I've been having some technical difficulties here. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Alina. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Beatrice. So I'm not sure, I think I've missed the first round on this of where I am and the implications, but in a nutshell, Australia has a very, very low COVID rate. And so it's almost as though it's a non-COVID world, except we've had a series of cases come in the state of Queensland just in recent days, and the whole country has gone into lockdown with like 70 new cases out of nowhere. But in the state of Western Australia, where I am, there is no COVID. Strict state lockdown. Wow. Nobody allowed in and out, but a lot of travel within a very big state. That's where I am. But I did want to say that there's a lot that we're learning, and we in the Mental Wellness Initiative are working on a new white paper on mental wellness in the time of COVID. And there's a lot we're learning from this. And one of these is that COVID is a vascular disease. We think of it as a respiratory disease, as a virus that attacks the respiratory system. It actually attacks the endothelium, the lining of blood vessels. So it's not just respiratory, it's throughout the whole vascular system. And long COVID can be understood in those terms, that nutrients are with decreasing ability absorbed from the body as the lining of the blood vessels is deteriorated. So we have to understand that this can affect the brain, the heart, the lungs, all organ systems, as well as trigger a catastrophic immune response. And we need to understand that there are neurological effects from this. 75% of people who have had COVID have the effect 6 months after. And that includes neurological effects, which include dizziness and headache, reduced limb strength, photophobia, stroke, hallucination, vision and speech problems, and balance disturbance. We need to understand this because as a wellness community, it's not sort of like someone's recovered and so let's get on with it. There are specific clinical manifestations that are there. In the people who are not affected neurologically, long COVID can be very debilitating, as many of us know, and we need to understand responses to that. And that can be very therapeutic and clinical. We might need to take clinical pathways to that. And I know that in the complementary field, in India and China, there are very big efforts looking at their traditional medical systems and their role in rebuilding people's strength and functionality following COVID
Jerry,
infection.
thank you for making the point about this is long-term, which means that we all are going to be talking about this and contributing to this. Can you also talk a little bit about the stigma of mental illness?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, what COVID has done is created what a lot of people are now calling a mental wellness pandemic, or mental illness or mental health pandemic. And what that means is that people are not being understood. And there's an increase. I saw a report just a week ago that there's a very significant increase in suicides among Japanese women who feel unable to cope, particularly single parent families and women in lower income groups. The stigma is that people can't live with the mental illness or mental health problems themselves. There is, of course, a societal stigma, but it's an internalized stigma as well. And we're seeing that in youth as well. Unfortunately, there is a very significant increase in suicides across the age spectrum and income spectrum. And what we find is that men in the Western world are more severely impacted than women in terms of mental health problems.
Jerry, one of the things, excuse me, Jerry, one of the things that you and I spoke about early on when this was just a discussion is that perhaps the term mental wellness can be helpful. I think it's already been helpful because instead of just talking about mental illness, there's, if people can, and more people are willing to talk about mental wellness, it brings the topic to light. And then there's a little bit more understanding about it. So would you say that that's happening with the term mental wellness?
I think it's definitely changing the thinking, but I do feel, sadly, that mental wellness has taken a bit of a hit by the pandemic because there's so much mental health problems, so many mental health problems, and mental wellness is a little disaggregate or aggregated, and it clearly needs to be disaggregated. For instance, there's a call that is saying, don't just recommend a mindful app. Ask if the person has enough food. Ask if their mortgage is going to be foreclosed. What is their family situation? There are a whole lot of socioeconomic issues wrapping around the challenges of COVID and long COVID that we need to understand. And they're not simply more conventional mental wellness pathways. They are life circumstances that need to be addressed as well. But I think mental wellness does give a horizon.
You bring up, and I'm going to read something from the Defining Mental Wellness report that I think is important and needs more discussion. But it is this issue of mental illness and mental wellness and mental health. from the report, evidence shows that improving our mental wellness can even reduce our risk of developing mental illness, but not enough attention is paid globally to mental illness prevention and mental wellness promotion. I want to go to Victor Brick if he's on real quickly, because he knows a lot about this. And can you just comment on this issue of mental illness and mental wellness?
Hi, Susie. I'm speaking on his behalf because he's not available at the moment.
Okay.
But it is an issue that we all need to be aware that there is a difference. And we love the Global Wellness Institute's display of the wellness, mental health continuum versus the vertical mental wellness continuum, where you have languishing on one end and flourishing on the opposite end. And yes, there are someone can be very considered to be mentally ill, but able to still flourish through and be productive in society and be able to work. So there are varying shades of this mental health wellness situation that we need to be respectful and mindful about everyone's specific needs.
Thank you, Lynn. And I just mentioned, and I hope you don't mind, but Victor talks about this. His brother had a mental illness and ended up in suicide. And so I know you and Victor are very clear about the fact that, this we can definitely help, but there is mental illness that also needs to be understood and obviously referenced in the medical arena. I'm going to end by opening up to a lot of you. And here's what I want to end with. I want to talk about technology and apps because we're seeing a lot out there. And I just want to know, we don't have a lot of time for anyone to expound on this, but if you have had success using something, a technology app, could you just unmute and tell us what you're using and maybe how it's helped you? I'm just curious, how many people are engaged in some kind of a technology that's helpful?
I'm using the Calm app every day.
Calm app?
Calm, yeah. So when I wake up, I do 10 minutes of meditation, and it really kind of helps me set my day. And I follow it up with 20 to 30 minutes of yoga. So, it's really helpful, which also comes from an app.
The yoga also. Thank you, Sabrina. Who else is using an app? And what app are you using?
Well, there's a variety of apps using health risk assessments, online health risk assessments, which...
Health risk assessment?
Yeah.
Is that the name of the app?
It's like an online app. Yeah, and it looks at all different aspects of your life, the social factors, economic factors, sleep, nutrition.
You, put the website in the chat so we'll know that. Who else is using an app? Just tell us what the name of it is and put it in the chat. And
hi, Susie.
Rob.
Susie,
yes.
This is Rahul. So we are using an app called Empower Health. It's EMPWR. It combines your lot of features from Calm, but it also gives you like at-home workouts for exercising, a complete nutrition plan, alongside if people who have high risk, then it helps them connect with the health coaches and all.
Thank you, Rahul, and put that in the chat too. So it's time. I'm going to say goodbye. I'd like the rest of you to please put in the chat any app that you are using that you are finding helpful. And may I just say that I think our industry needs to be more proactive in learning about these technology solutions, because I kind of sense that we're not exactly as far ahead as like Silicon Valley obviously is. So Lawrence, put in a bunch of apps for us that we can explore that you would suggest that maybe we should look into, that we could communicate to our constituents. So thank you all.